My name is Donna R. Barnhill, and I used to believe family was the safest place in the world, but I was wrong. Life taught me a painful truth. Not every child receives equal love at home. For years, I always felt like a guest in my own house, like I was allowed to exist there as long as I didn't ask for too much, feel too loudly, or hope for more than crumbs. Since I was young, I knew I was different from Tara, my younger sister, by 2 years. She was the star of the family while I learned early to rely on myself. Tara was showered with care and affection, while I was left to figure things out alone. Our parents were average middle-class people. Money was never a big problem. They could afford to raise both of us well, but instead, they placed all their dreams, love, and attention on Tara. Whenever Tara asked for something, my parents did everything possible to get it, but if I ever wanted anything, they always had a reason to refuse. I remember when I was 6, I received a teddy bear for Christmas. I loved it so much and held it close every night. It was soft and warm and smelled like new fabric and safety. And for a little kid who didn't feel safe in her own home, that bear mattered more than it should have. But the moment Tara saw it, she cried and begged for the same one. Without hesitation, my father grabbed it from me and gave it to her. I burst into tears, clutching empty air like it could turn back into something mine. All he said was, "Donna, you're the older sister. You should give it to your sister." My mother nodded in agreement, not concerned about my feelings, like mine were an inconvenience that needed to be managed. At 12, after practicing for months, I had a piano recital. I had carefully placed 3 tickets on the dining table, one for Mom, one for Dad, and one for Tara. I was excited to see my parents in the crowd, to finally make them proud, to finally feel like I belonged to them for one night. I scanned the audience before walking on stage, searching for their faces, but they never came. Tara had a slight cold, and they chose to take her to the doctor instead. My teacher drove me home afterward, trying to console me with words that couldn't fill the empty space my family should have occupied. I remember sitting in the passenger seat, staring out the window, pretending I was fine, because I had learned early that disappointment was only embarrassing if you let people see it. At 14, I won a state-level science competition. No one mentioned it at home. That same day, Tara scored a single goal in her school soccer game, and I'm sure you can guess who got a party. Our living room was decorated with streamers and balloons. My father grilled her favorite foods in the backyard while my mother baked a cake with "Superstar" written in blue icing. I stood in the doorway watching them celebrate her like she had conquered the world, and I felt something sink inside me, a quiet understanding that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough. I kept trying anyway. I kept hoping they'd notice me. Honor roll, debate, team captain, volunteer work at the local shelter, none of it seemed to penetrate the invisible barrier that kept me outside their circle of attention and affection. I learned how to smile at dinner while feeling hollow. I learned how to clap for Tara while my own hands felt numb. I learned how to swallow my needs so deeply that eventually I couldn't even name them. Then something happened when I turned 18 that changed everything. Not because they finally loved me, but because I finally understood they never would in the way I needed. After high school, I earned a full scholarship to a top university 3 states away. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember standing in the kitchen, holding that acceptance letter so tightly the paper bent at the corners. I looked at my parents, waiting for something I had been waiting for my entire life. Pride, joy, even a simple, "We're happy for you." I wanted to see their faces change just once, the way parents' faces are supposed to when their child does something big. My father sighed instead, and he spoke gently, his expression more concerned than pleased. "Donna, do you really need to go so far away for college? We're not well off, and if you leave, who will help us at home?" I stood there confused, the scholarship letter suddenly feeling heavier in my hands. Help them at home, like my future was a household chore they couldn't afford to lose. Then my mother added bluntly, her lips pressed into a thin line, "Tara will be in college in 2 years. Her tuition will cost a lot. We can't afford both of you." I was stunned, the words hitting me like physical blows. "But I have a scholarship. Everything's paid for," I said, pointing to the letter as if they might have misunderstood. I remember the tremor in my voice, the small panic, because something in me still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, that they just didn't know what a full scholarship meant. My father shook his head, not meeting my eyes. "That's only tuition. What about rent, food, and other costs? Living away is expensive." And just like that, it hit me with crystal clarity. They were ready to cover everything for Tara: tuition, housing, meal plan, spending money, but not even basic needs for me. The scholarship that should have been celebrated was instead treated as an inconvenience, a disruption to their plans. I took a deep breath, gathered my strength, and said, "I'll manage. My scholarship covers living expenses. If needed, I'll get a part-time job. I won't ask for help. I won't be anyone's burden." My voice didn't waver, but inside something was cracking apart. It was the feeling of letting go of a dream I didn't even know I still had, the dream that maybe my parents would fight for me the way they fought for Tara. Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. My father looked at my mother, waiting for her to say something. She sighed, crossed her arms, and muttered flatly, "Do whatever you want." My father nodded, cold and indifferent. "If that's your decision, I won't stop you." No joy, no support, no words of encouragement, just cold silence, like my leaving wasn't an emotional farewell, just a logistical issue. Their faces told me everything I needed to know. My departure was a problem to be managed, not a moment to be cherished. The next day, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a backpack. No one helped me carry them to the bus station. No one waved goodbye from the porch. I remember dragging my suitcase wheels over the uneven sidewalk, hearing them rattle like they were protesting, and thinking, this is it. This is the moment I become someone without a family. On the bus, I watched my hometown shrink in the window until it became a blur of rooftops and trees and streets that had never really held me. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurting, but because crying felt like asking them for something they would never give. I clenched my jaw and stared forward and promised myself that if I was going to survive, I would do it on my own terms. I moved into a dormitory, not because I liked it, but because I had no choice. Every dollar mattered in my new life. I counted pennies for laundry and skipped meals to save for textbooks. I learned the taste of cheap noodles and cafeteria leftovers, and the kind of exhaustion that sits in your bones and makes you feel older than you are. From that point, I knew if I wanted to survive, I was on my own. While other students chose majors based on passion or interest, I approached my education with calculated precision. I chose real estate as my major, not because I loved it, but because it was a fast track to earning money. In my situation, chasing dreams wasn't an option. I needed something practical, something with clear metrics for success and tangible rewards for hard work, something my family life had never provided. Through a school connection, I got a part-time job at a real estate agency near campus. The pay was low, just $15 an hour for answering phones and filing paperwork, but commissions came with every sale or lease. That incentive structure appealed to me. Direct correlation between effort and reward. I threw myself into the job, determined to succeed where others saw only drudgery. I had no contacts, no experience, and no name. But I had determination forged through years of being overlooked. While other students spent their free time at parties or campus events, I studied the market, practiced sales skills, and learned how to handle clients. I observed senior agents closely, memorizing how they spoke and persuaded customers, noting which approaches worked and which failed. Closing my first rental felt surreal. It was a small 2-bedroom apartment for a pair of graduate students. When I saw that $200 commission in my account, I stared at it in disbelief. For the first time, I earned real money through my own efforts without begging or being made to feel guilty for having needs. And I didn't know it yet, but that feeling was going to become my addiction. Not money, but proof. Proof that effort could actually change your life. Proof that I wasn't the problem. Proof that I could build something no one could take away. That part-time job paid my bills and covered my needs. I kept my head down and continued my studies with single-minded focus, budgeting every dollar, planning every expense, calculating everything like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. While other students talked about internships abroad or passion projects, I talked to myself about rent, credit scores, and long-term equity. Sometimes my parents would call, but it was mostly out of formality, like checking off a box labeled parental duty. Their questions were always shallow, skimming the surface of my life without interest in the depths. Are you doing okay? Still keeping up with school? Tara is working hard too. The conversation always found its way back to her. I kept my answers short. I'm fine, I'd say, offering nothing more. They never asked what I was really doing. They never asked how I was managing rent or food or the exhaustion that came from juggling classes and work. They didn't care about my growing client base or the increasing numbers in my bank account. Eventually, I stopped bothering to share anything. I learned that vulnerability was just another way to be disappointed. After graduation, with a GPA that placed me in the top 10% of my class, I had 3 years of experience and a strong client base. Instead of resting after 4 intense years of study and work, I jumped straight into full-time employment. I closed deals, built my network, and collected commissions that grew larger with each transaction. Every signature on a contract felt like another brick in a wall I was building between me and the girl who once lost her teddy bear because she was told to be generous. But I didn't want to stay a broker forever, working to make someone else rich. I wanted ownership, control, independence, things I had never had in my family. I studied market trends obsessively, analyzed neighborhood developments, and tracked property values like it was a second religion. I lived modestly, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, driving a used car, eating simple meals at home. Every extra dollar went into savings. 2 years after graduation, I bought my first house, a $500,000 property in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I paid $300,000 up front, money I had saved dollar by dollar, and took a loan for the rest. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I spent weeks calculating risks and weighing every detail, going over mortgage terms with a financial advisor I had carefully vetted. I ran projections until my eyes burned. But deep down, I knew it was the right step. The day I held those keys in my hand, something inside me settled. For the first time, I truly belonged somewhere, not because someone allowed me to, but because I earned it. I kept the purchase a secret from my family. There was no reason to tell them, no desire to seek approval that would never truly be given. It was my achievement, and it felt right keeping it to myself, protected from their indifference, or worse, their sudden interest now that I had something they might want. That first property became the beginning of something bigger than I had imagined. I didn't stop with one success. I kept working, investing, and expanding. I rented out the house and used the income to secure a second property, then a third. Within 5 years, I owned several apartments, commercial spaces, and even started investing in hotels. I studied financing structures and negotiated aggressively. I built partnerships carefully, never relying on anyone who hadn't proven themselves. By 28, I had nearly everything I once thought was impossible: financial security, professional respect, and a growing empire that responded to my decisions. My name meant something in the local real estate community. People returned my calls quickly. Investors listened when I spoke. Meanwhile, Tara couldn't hold a job. She had graduated from a private college fully funded by my parents, who had taken out a second mortgage to cover her expenses. She earned a degree in communications, but had no clear career direction. She jumped from one job to another: administrative assistant, social media coordinator, event planner. Each position ended within 6 months. She either quit because she was undervalued or was let go because she didn't fit the culture. Every time she failed, my parents made excuses. She just hasn't found the right job yet. That company didn't see her potential. She's young. She can try different things. They never once held her accountable or encouraged resilience. They never told her to toughen up, the way they silently expected me to. I never planned to reveal how far I'd come, but no matter how hard you try, some things eventually surface. 2 years ago, my father sent me a short message. "Are you free tomorrow? Come home for dinner." No greetings, no questions about my life. Just a cold invitation, like I was being summoned rather than welcomed. I almost declined. My finger hovered over a drafted reply that said maybe another time, but I hesitated. Something in me, stubborn and foolish, still seeking what I had been denied for decades, wondered if maybe this time they genuinely wanted to see me. Maybe this was their attempt to bridge the gap. I drove to their house at 7 that evening, parking my modest sedan in the driveway. The house looked unchanged. The same faded paint, the same front steps, the same porch light that had never flickered for me. Dinner felt like a replay of every meal we had shared since I was a child. Conversations revolved around Tara, her latest job prospect, her dating life, her plans for the future. "Tara is trying out a new job at a marketing firm," my mother said proudly while passing the potatoes. "She's thinking of launching a business," my father added, nodding encouragingly at my sister. "She just needs a bit more time to settle into her career path." I listened quietly, nodding at appropriate moments. None of it surprised me. The golden child and the afterthought. Roles cast in concrete long before I could spell the word favoritism. Then something unexpected shifted everything. While I was in the kitchen grabbing water, my phone buzzed on the dining table where I had left it. I heard it but ignored it, knowing I could check it later. Tara didn't share my restraint. "Hey, did your boyfriend text? Let me check," she smirked, grabbing my phone with the casual entitlement she had always displayed toward my belongings. Before I could stop her, the screen lit up, and everything changed. The screen lit up with a notification that was impossible to ignore. Contract confirmed. Hillside Retreat Resort purchase. $1,200,000. Tara read it aloud, her voice rising with every word. Silence crashed over the dining room like someone had sucked all the air out. My mother froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. My father slowly put down his chopsticks and stared at me like I had just confessed to a crime. Tara's smirk faded into something darker. Disbelief first, then resentment. "Are you serious? $1.2 million for a resort," she said, her tone somewhere between accusation and awe. I walked back into the room calmly and took my phone from her hand. I turned off the screen and placed it face down on the table. "Yes," I said simply. "I bought a small resort property." My father blinked rapidly. Is this real?" I nodded. My mother's expression changed first. The shock melted into calculation. "Where did you get that kind of money?" she asked. Not proud, not impressed, just assessing. I leaned back in my chair. "From working." The air felt heavy. They were seeing me for the first time, not as the forgotten older sister, but as something else, something useful. Tara crossed her arms. "How long have you been hiding this from us?" "I didn't hide it," I replied evenly. "No one ever asked." My father cleared his throat, and suddenly his voice softened unnaturally. "I never imagined you'd achieve something like this. I always thought you had a simple office job." I stared at him. The words sounded like a compliment, but they landed like an insult. For years, he never cared to ask what I did. Now that the number had a comma in it, suddenly I was interesting. He reached across the table and patted my hand gently, a gesture so foreign it almost felt staged. "My daughter is talented," he announced proudly, as if he had always believed in me. "If you had told us earlier, we could have guided you better." I pulled my hand back slowly. "I'm fine managing on my own." That's when I saw it. The glance between my parents. Quick, silent, calculating. My father leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said casually, "this house is getting small, outdated. Don't you think it's time we move somewhere better?" I tilted my head. "Better? There's a beautiful estate in the suburbs," my mother added smoothly. "Big yard, garden, spacious rooms. Around $2 million. It wouldn't be hard for you now." There it was. I set my glass down gently. "So you're asking me to buy you a house?" My father corrected quickly. "Not buy. Invest. The house would stay in your name. We would all live there together. You're the successful one now. It's only fair you help out a little." It sounded less like a family conversation and more like a business pitch, like I was a funding source being approached with an opportunity. Before I could respond, Tara straightened in her chair. "Actually," she said, tapping her fingers against the table as if she'd rehearsed this, "have you ever thought about diversifying your investments?" I raised an eyebrow. "Into what?" She smiled. "My new house." I didn't speak. She continued confidently. "I found the perfect property in Lakeside Hills. 5 bedrooms, pool, home theater. It's about $5 million. I just need you to fund it." The room felt smaller. $5 million, I repeated calmly. "Yes," she nodded. "You clearly have the resources. I've already told my friends about it. If I save on my own, it'll take forever, but with your help, I could move in next month." I studied her face carefully. She wasn't joking. She wasn't embarrassed. She expected it. "You want me to buy you a $5 million mansion," I said flatly. She frowned, annoyed at my tone. "It's not like you'd feel it. It's nothing for you." I let out a quiet laugh. "If it's nothing, why don't you fund it yourself?" She slammed her hand lightly against the table. "Because I don't want to waste years scraping together money when you're sitting on millions. If I had the capital now, I could multiply it tenfold." So what you want is a shortcut," I said. "Not to build something from nothing, just immediate access to wealth you didn't earn." Her jaw tightened. "You don't trust me." I trust patterns," I replied. My father's patience snapped. "Donna, stop being selfish. Helping your sister isn't too much to ask." My mother added sharply, "With your money, a few $100,000 means nothing." I looked at all three of them. The same people who had told me my scholarship was a burden. The same people who couldn't show up to my recital. "If it's so insignificant," I said quietly, "why don't you fund it yourselves?" Silence. Tara glared at me. "Have you ever thought about this family? About anyone but yourself?" I stood up slowly. "Has this family ever thought about me?" No one answered. I walked toward the door, but before leaving I turned back. You call me selfish, I said calmly, but have you ever considered who the truly selfish ones in this family are? Then I left. I believed that would be the end of it. I was wrong, because their greed didn't end at dinner. It had already moved into something much darker. A year passed. The calls slowed. The guilt texts faded. For the first time in my life, silence from my family felt almost peaceful. I assumed they had finally accepted that I was not their emergency fund, not their retirement plan, not their shortcut to luxury. I underestimated them. One afternoon, while reviewing numbers in my office, my phone buzzed. My father's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He sighed heavily, and the sound was shaky in a way I had never heard before. "We're about to lose the house," he said. "The bank is ready to seize it." I straightened in my chair. "What do you mean, lose the house?" "We took a mortgage," he replied quickly. "Now we can't make the payments anymore." A cold feeling slid down my spine. "You mortgaged the house. For what?" "An investment," he said. "A restaurant opportunity. It looked safe at the time. A friend promised quick returns." "You risked the house for that," I said, unable to hide the edge in my voice. "It sounded secure," he defended weakly. "It failed. We're short $300,000. If we don't pay, the bank takes everything." 300,000. He let the number hang like it was small, like it was a minor inconvenience. "Can you help us?" he asked softly. "It's just a loan. We'll pay you back." Just a loan. I closed my eyes for a second. I could afford it. That was the dangerous part. But something felt wrong. Too rushed. Too dramatic. "I need time," I said steadily. "There is no time," he panicked. "Final notice. We're finished if you don't step in." I ended the call before he could continue. Then I called Jessica. Jessica wasn't just my closest friend. She was a financial analyst with a talent for seeing through smoke and mirrors. If something felt off, I trusted her instinct as much as my own. "I need you to check my parents' house situation," I told her. "They claim the bank is about to seize it due to a $300,000 mortgage. I want the full financial history." She didn't ask why. "Give me a few hours." When she called back that evening, her voice was tight. "You were right to question it," she said. "There is a $300,000 mortgage, but that's not the interesting part." My heart rate picked up. "What is?" "The house isn't in your parents' names anymore." I froze. "It was transferred," she continued carefully, "about a year ago." "A year ago?" I repeated. "Yes, and the sole borrower on the mortgage is Tara." The room felt suddenly smaller. "Say that again." "Your parents transferred the deed to Tara. Then Tara took out the $300,000 loan. Legally, it's her property and her debt." My pulse pounded in my ears. "When did they sign it over?" Jessica exhaled slowly. "Right after that dinner, when they found out how wealthy you were. The pieces clicked together so cleanly it made me dizzy. This wasn't desperation. This was a plan. They transferred the house to Tara. Then Tara borrowed against it. If things went wrong, they would call me, make it sound like they were losing everything, count on my guilt. They had engineered a crisis. I stood up from my desk slowly. "Jessica," I said quietly, "I need every document, deed transfer, mortgage agreement, payment history, everything." I'll have it by morning," she said. "And Donna, I'm sorry." I didn't respond, because I already knew what had to happen next. The next morning, before the sun was fully up, I drove to the house I grew up in. The driveway looked the same. The paint was peeling slightly near the garage. The front steps creaked the way they always had. My father opened the door before I knocked. "You came," he said, relief flooding his face. My mother appeared behind him with a coffee cup in her hand. Tara was at the dining table, scrolling through her phone like none of this concerned her. I stepped inside. "We need to talk," I said. They sat across from me. I placed the folders on the table and spread the documents out carefully. "You told me the bank was taking the house because of a failed restaurant investment," I began calmly. "But there was no restaurant." My father's expression shifted. "You transferred the deed to Tara. Then she took out a $300,000 mortgage. This was not an accident. This was planned." Silence. My mother's fingers tightened around her cup. Tara didn't even look embarrassed. "It doesn't matter now," my father muttered. "We still need help." I let out a cold laugh. "So you lied. You staged urgency. You thought if I believed you were cornered, I would transfer the money without asking questions." My mother's patience snapped. "The money is already spent. What matters now is whether you help your family." I looked at Tara. "This is your loan," I said. "You signed it." She shrugged casually. "You can cover it. It's nothing to you." "Nothing. 300,000 is nothing," I repeated slowly. "You have millions," she snapped. "Don't pretend this hurts you." My father leaned forward. "Family helps family. I felt something inside me go very still. You signed over your house, I said quietly. You leveraged it. You gave her the money, and now you want me to clean up the mess. No one denied it, so I gave them an option. If you sell the house to me, I said evenly, I will consider buying it and letting you stay. But that's the only practical solution. For a second, they just stared at me. Then my mother exploded. She grabbed a glass from the table and threw it against the floor. It shattered, the sound sharp and violent in the quiet room. You are no daughter of mine, she shouted. Tara stood up furious. My father looked stunned. I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just clarity. I walked to the door. This time I didn't look back. I thought that was the end. But they weren't finished. A week later, my lawyer called. They're suing you, he said. For what? For parental support. They weren't just asking for $300,000 anymore. They wanted me legally obligated to pay them every month for the rest of their lives. That was the moment I understood. This was never about help. It was about control. And they were willing to take it to court. When my lawyer forwarded the official complaint, I read it twice. They claimed they had sacrificed everything for me, that they were elderly and vulnerable, that I had a moral and legal obligation to provide them with lifelong financial support because I was their successful daughter. They painted themselves as victims abandoned by a wealthy, heartless child. They even attached a proposed amount, $5,000 per month. $5,000 indefinitely. I stared at the number and felt something almost laughable rise in my chest. Even now, after the mortgage lie, after the deed transfer, after the glass shattered on the floor, they still believed they were entitled to me. Not to love, not to reconciliation, to income. I called my lawyer immediately. They want to fight in court, I said calmly. Fine, we fight. Preparing for the hearing didn't take long. My attorney gathered everything, the deed transfer, the mortgage under Tara's name, my financial independence since 18, the absence of any financial support from them for over a decade. We built a timeline so clean and sharp it almost felt surgical. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived early. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and stale air. My parents were already seated at the plaintiff's table. My father looked older than I remembered, bitterness etched into his face. My mother sat stiffly beside him, jaw tight. Tara looked irritated more than worried, like this was an inconvenience that should have resolved itself already. I felt nothing. No tremor in my hands, no ache in my chest. Just distance. Their lawyer stood first. He delivered a dramatic speech about aging parents, abandoned by a successful child. He described their supposed sacrifices, their financial ruin, and my cold refusal to assist them despite having the means. He emphasized the $5,000 monthly support as reasonable and necessary. They made me sound like a villain. Then my lawyer stood, calm, measured, precise. He laid out the facts. My parents voluntarily transferred their house to Tara. Tara voluntarily took out the mortgage. The loan was not in my name. Since I was 18, I had never received a cent from them. There was no legal dependency, no contractual obligation, no shared asset, no evidence of parental sacrifice beyond standard upbringing, which the court does not monetize retroactively. The judge flipped through the documents. He asked a few questions. Then he said one sentence that ended it. There is no legal basis requiring the defendant to provide financial support. Case dismissed. It was that simple. 3 weeks of tension, months of manipulation, years of resentment, reduced to one calm dismissal. My father's face drained of color. My mother's lips trembled. Tara looked truly afraid for the first time. They had bet everything on the idea that I would fold. They lost. As the courtroom began to empty, I stepped closer to them. This is the last time we will ever see each other, I said quietly. My father's eyes filled with tears. Donna, you can't just leave us like this. I held his gaze. You left me a long time ago. I turned and walked out of the courthouse without looking back. That was the last day I saw them for over a year. No calls, no emails, no surprise visits, nothing. Rumors reached me through distant relatives. They said I was heartless, that I had millions but refused to save my parents' house, that no one knew where they had gone after the bank repossessed it. I didn't respond. None of those relatives had called me when I was 18 and eating instant noodles to afford textbooks. None of them had checked in when I worked double shifts to make rent. Their opinions felt weightless. My business continued to grow. I expanded into international markets. I launched a charitable foundation focused on education for underprivileged children. I mentored young entrepreneurs who reminded me of myself, determined, disciplined, alone. I built something good. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, Jessica called. Her voice was different this time. I found them. My grip tightened around the phone. Where? They're living in a small apartment across the city, she said quietly. Your father had a stroke 3 months ago. They're struggling financially. And Tara, she left. Left. The golden child. Gone the moment the money dried up. I said nothing for several seconds. How do you know this? I finally asked. One of my clients knows them, Jessica replied. She mentioned it casually. She didn't know I knew you. After I hung up, I sat in my office for hours watching the rain slide down the glass. I had fought them. I had won. But this wasn't victory. This was reality. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside a run-down apartment building on the other side of the city. The paint was peeling. The windows were dull. It smelled faintly of damp concrete. I stood there for nearly 20 minutes debating whether to walk away. Finally, I pressed the buzzer for apartment 43. A weak voice crackled through the intercom. Who is it? It's Donna. Silence. Then the door buzzed open. The elevator was broken. I climbed 4 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last. When my mother opened the door, she had aged a decade and a year. Her hair was fully gray, her eyes hollow. May I come in? I asked softly. She stepped aside without speaking. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a narrow kitchen, a living room barely large enough for a couch and a recliner. My father sat in that recliner, a blanket over his legs. The right side of his face drooped slightly from the stroke. He looked smaller. Donna, he whispered, his speech slightly slurred. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, he asked, Why are you here? I took a breath. I heard about the stroke. I wanted to see how you were. My mother laughed bitterly. Now you care. You sued me, I said calmly. What did you expect? My father looked down. We were desperate, he admitted. We made mistakes. It was the first time I had ever heard him say that. We favored Tara, he said slowly. We took you for granted. We were wrong. The words didn't erase anything, but they existed. Where is she? I asked. She left, my mother said sharply. Once the money was gone, she had no reason to stay. The irony hung thick in the air. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a business card. This is my attorney's contact, I said, placing it on the coffee table. Call him tomorrow. He will arrange coverage for medical expenses and find you better housing. My mother stared at me. Why would you help us now? She whispered. I'm not doing it for you, I said honestly. I'm doing it for me, because I don't want to become the kind of person who walks away knowing someone needs help, even if that someone hurt me. I moved toward the door. I don't know if we will ever have a relationship again, I added quietly, but I won't let you suffer. My father tried to stand but couldn't. Don't thank me, I said gently. Just call the lawyer. As I walked back down the stairs and out into the damp air, I felt lighter. Not healed, not reconciled, but clear. I had broken the cycle. Their approval never defined me. Their love or absence of it never determined my worth. I built myself from nothing. And I am enough exactly as I am.